Right. This is I think a particularly pertinent meeting to be having at the present time, given what's happening across industry and the problems that we're facing in terms of the role of the law, the response to trade union bureaucracy, and the rest of it. We hope the discussion will reflect people's real experiences and problems in trying to grapple with these problems. And because we do expect quite a whole number of contributions, we're going to be having speaker slips. So while Duncan's speaking, people will be going up and down the aisles with slips. Just indicate and get the slip sent into the front, please. Duncan will be speaking on class struggle, the bureaucracy and the rank and file for around 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Comrades, we have been through, we've all lived, a long period of reaction. Not of black reaction, fascism or anything of this sort, but a long period in which the working class and working class movement has suffered a number of defeats. Some of those defeats were very serious defeats. We run through briefly. The steel strike, 1980, was in truth a turning point. It was a turning point in the circumstances of the time. I don't want to develop that argument. If people disagree with things, they should say so afterwards. It was followed, of course, by 1982, the NHS dispute, which was at the end of the day a defeat. It was not quite such a shattering defeat, but it was a defeat. We had the total collapse, the ignominious collapse of the rail strike. A defeat, not simply to the bureaucracy, but a defeat for the whole movement. Running on, and to save time, ignoring some important disputes, we had a number of important turning points. All of them, so far, against the interests of working people. We had Warrington, the Warrington dispute. You know, the importance of a dispute, of a conflict, is not necessarily related to the number of people involved. The Warrington dispute, a pivotal little operation by Eddie Sharp. As people remember, printing in Stockport, he set up a non-union shop in Warrington. A few hundred people involved, not earth-shaking in those terms, but actually the success of enforcing the first instalment of the Tory trade union laws was a very significant defeat for us, and was one of the things I'm absolutely confident that led to collapse of solidarity. The NGA left on its own. The NGA bureaucracy wasn't too unhappy about that, but that's not the point. Defeat. You can set up an operation, an open shop operation, non-union, the law will protect you, and the working class movement will not react as it had reacted in the first half of the 70s. You will not be crushed. And let's be clear, Shah was hardly, a giant. He was, in a certain sense, a cockroach. He was a small-scale operation. We know very well, of course, that the big printing bosses, that Maxwell and Murdoch in particular, were slight variation. Maxwell, not happy, thought that we might be on a loser here and therefore damp it down a bit. Murdoch rubbing his hands and thinking, he's my cat, whether he understands it or not. If he wins, then the big one for me. That defeat left absolutely beyond question, because defeats like victories have consequences. Even though there are a few people involved. Encourage the government to undertake its long-prepared operation against the miners. Now we come to this enormously important struggle lasting a year, which was a defeat of very great dimensions, splitting the union, unconditional victory really for the NCP. And these consequences, it leads on to what? To Wapping, another year-long dispute. The breaking of trade union organisation as such, in fact, because I don't count the nominal recognition of the EPTU as trade unionism. Well, we must be also left, we wouldn't be also left without the EPTU, but the truth is, I haven't even got an agreement. again, big victory for the other side. Leading again to the seaman, P&O, a big victory for the other side. Now, I don't want people to think that I've been reading Marxism today too carefully. I'm saying, oh, whoa, the working class movement's had it and so on. Not at all. Not at all. But it is necessary to understand the present situation, to understand that it does arise against the background of a series of defeats. Now, it appears that there is a certain shift in the situation. I don't want to exaggerate, we must be cautious, but nevertheless, we can say, in truth, in this period, although the enemy succeeded in inflicting a number of important defeats, they did not, and eroding trade unionism at the margin, yes, decline of membership, establishment of non-union operations and so on, they did not succeed basically in crushing the movement. Now, in the circumstances, rising level of inflation, and of course, let's be quite clear, see a shift in the political climate. It's not true, of course, that there's an automatic correlation between shifts in the political climate, opinion polls, election and so on, and industrial struggle. There is not an automatic correlation. Nevertheless, a shift in the climate of opinion is significant. Workers do not live, none of us live, in little compartments, one of which is labelled job, the other which is labelled home, the other which is labelled politics, life, etc. No. There is a doubt in my mind that one of the factors in the present situation, one of them, I know it's the most important, is the clear shift away from factorism in terms of assets. That is a contradictory development, and is where we come to the whole question of bureaucracy in the rank and file. It is contradictory. A shift away, an erosion of support for factorism. It is a shift in that sense to the left, but we should have no illusions at all that it is a shift towards us in any direct sense. On the contrary, it is a shift towards the social democratic right. I mean social democratic in the real sense. You know, the SVP was always a fraud in that sense. It was never a social democratic party. The Labour Party is a social democratic party. And this again is contradictory. You see, on the one hand, people have a bit more confidence. She can be beaten. On the other hand, the appeal of Kinnock and the rest of them, you know, play it cautious, we know what we're doing for, unquestionably, is reinforced by his successes. Now then, without prediction, there is a certain shift in the situation. Actually, I'll go further than that. We must be cautious in this sense. I personally do not doubt that the shift is a real one and that it will have very considerable long-term results. But it is also true that we must expect defeats. We must accept the lows in the struggle. It is not at all the case. No, it's never been the case. If you get a simple shift and then it's all gone, currents running our way, whereas previously it was running their way. No, nevertheless there is a shift. So it is in these circumstances that it is important for us to look at our analysis, crucial question, composition and structure of the working class movement, and in particular the relationship between the bureaucracy and the working class. We start, and all this is very familiar, I'm sure, but we have to nevertheless take it seriously, take our own analysis seriously. The bureaucracy is not simply the enemy. The bureaucracy plays a dual role. On the one hand, it is rooted in the working class movement. It is, unfortunately, an integral part of the working class movement and will be up to and beyond the socialist revolution. We should have no illusions about that. Why is this the case? You must just think of it calmly and rationally. The bureaucracy, by definition, consists of professionals who, put in a situation, the practice of the other side, the immediate concerns of finance, and so on and so forth, tend always to be a conservative led. Yes, but it's not at all true that they can be described simply as that. Not at all. Precisely because they are part of the working class movement, they have a stake in the movement. Their jobs, their prestige, their incomes, and so on depend on it. Now, of course, these are generalizations. organisations. You can look at a whole range of bureaucrats and say, oh, these are good ones, those are bad ones. It's a mistaken way of looking at it as a layer, broadly, the dual role. Now, let's look at this dual role in terms of some recent disputes. You see, where am I? You see, yes, I'll come back to that later. Let us examine, it's all right, now the argument sounds better to me now than as written there. Let us examine 4 recent disputes. I do not choose these disputes because of the numbers involved or even of their immediate economic impact, but to illustrate the complexities of the relationships between the bureaucracy, the rank and file, and so on. We'll start with the Stig erectors. Now, not earth-shaking, you may say. Actually, a significant turn in the sense that this is a wholly rank and file operation. It is not true, as it is true in some other cases, that they were encouraged by the bureaucracy of the CEU. On the contrary, all the evidence is that the bureaucracy of the CEU has done its damnedest to contain the dispute and to kill the dispute. Wholly rank and file. And yet, and here again, we have to look at the heritage of the past. Point is often made by people who've been contacted with this dispute. It's fantastically passive. Here is this group of militants leaving, and they've got the right basic ideas, except that they do not see the need to involve matters of critical. We don't need more pickets. We're 9 of us, 10 of us, or whatever it is. We go around the sites, etc., etc. We've got the thing under control. Not understanding that actually the momentum of the struggle depends on the involvement of large numbers of the workforce. And these people are not bureaucrats, excuse me. They are rank and file, still fixers. Nevertheless, the impact of debate over a long period of years has eroded the tradition of aggression and solidarity at rank and file level. And it would be quite utopian for us to expect this to spring up anew just like that. Of course it's true that in a real upsurge, a period of profound radicalisation, people who we knew nothing about come forward with better tactical ideas than we have. No question about it, creativity and so on and so forth. But come on, we are not yet in a period of generalised upturn, and therefore it is not surprising that rank and file leaders, genuine ones, can be conservative. Let us refer again to the London Tube dispute. Now, those people who don't live in London will be sick of hearing. Nevertheless, it is interesting in that it's unquestionably primarily a rank and file operation to which the bureaucracy is forced to respond. Nevertheless, these same rank and file leaders have all manner of self-defeating notions. In particular, inter-union rivalry, unwillingness to carry things further, and so on and so on. Right? That's not surprising. The interesting thing is, however, that rank and file initiatives have occurred in significant cases at all. That's new. I don't mean it's new in this to the British working class. I mean it is new in the period that we have been illustrating. Let us look at the second dispute, which is rather different. On the face of it, it appears to be a rank and file operation. I refer, of course, to the dispute on the oil rigs. In truth, it's not as simple as that. The fact of the matter is that sections, significant sections of the bureaucracy, actually pushing people, actually encouraging people. Rank and file initiative, yes, but in this case, the relevant sections of the bureaucracy, apart from wanting to block this and what the thing's organised, are actually willing, to a point anyway, to encourage the dispute. The second sort of circumstance. Then we come to a very important one, the NUR dispute. Now, of course, opinions about what might have happened if things were different are all speculative and, it's never possible to prove them. But let's look at it. Here, practically closer, but no rank and leave aside the truth, no rank and file organisation in any serious sense, no rank and file initiative in any serious sense. No. The initiative initiative came through the union machine, pushed of course from below, but nevertheless, fundamentally, the NUR leadership. And this leads us to an important question. Would the mass of railroad have come out last week, next week, etc., on an unofficial call? As I say, these things are speculative. I doubt it, frankly. I doubt it. Partly because there's no tradition of branch and farm organisation. Partly because they needed the confidence, many of them, not millions, needed the confidence of an official dispute, which is a double-edged weapon, no question about it, but again, that's a third variant. The role of the bureaucracy of the leadership in that case has actually been within very severe limits. Yes, we understand that, and yes, they can cut our throats tomorrow, we understand that, but nevertheless, the role of the leadership has been a progressive one. And it's my opinion, at least, open to people who disagree, a national dispute which otherwise might very well not have got off the ground. And then we come to the absolute opposite, the docks dispute. Now here you have a classic. In our analysis we say, look, the bureaucracy is conservative, intermediate layer, always seeks to sell out, always inclined to sell out, and so on and so forth. True, with many qualifications. But in this case, true without any qualifications whatsoever. You know, no question about it. Here we have the situation where leadership and the left leadership, let me remind you. Comrades may recall last year, great victory for the left in the TNG elections, alarm on the bourgeois press, and so on and so forth. On bloody trots got on the executive, etc. It is this left leadership, under the great left-winger Ron Todd, that actually has played a role which is not qualitatively different from that of the far-right leadership of the union. They pursue the course of action, guaranteed, insofar as anything can guarantee, that the dispute is lost. First of all, the strict adherence to the law. The refusal to push in unofficially. Yes, out, put some pressure on the police, which is basically what the NU is doing in the oil dispute. No, the course of action, there can be no question of action outside the registered courts. And in the registered courts, well, yes, someday maybe, I know they fixed a date after an unofficial action which collapsed, a date after a long period during which an official here was to speak with more authority on the impact on the ground here than I can, I hope someone is going to speak. Nevertheless, the classic bureaucratic step. Okay, let's look at it then. We summarise our position as follows. We say, bureaucracy is with us. Bureaucracy can't be wished out of existence. The bureaucracy most certainly cannot be ignored. Part of the movement, very influential part of the movement. We are concerned with the interrelationships, and we are concerned with them from the point of view of developing the course of story in a very simple sense. Never mind the grand political visualizations, what we need are one or two good victories. Right? Whether on economic grounds or what have you, of course it's I mean, the basic, the basic factor, oil dispute is somewhat different in this respect, is the rising level of inflation. And one or two significant victories, and significant means not significant in terms of what we think, oh my God, we only got 10.5%, we could have got 20, but significant in the minds of the people involved, and above all in the minds of the workers. Now, let us look then at our operation. Now, I know people think sometimes that I make these stories, but I assure you that let us take the question of unofficial and official action. It was argued recently by a good comment, no doubt you've got the right instinct, that actually we don't want an official dispute. We don't want an official dispute. Why? Because an official dispute will strengthen the hands of the officials, and the officials are then in a better position to sell us out. Now, of course, it's true. An official dispute does, in many circumstances, strengthen the hands of the officials. Of course it does. But then let's look at the reality of the interrelationship. The fact is that given the general state of third-class consciousness, there is a big difference between an official dispute and an unofficial one. Most workers, under these circumstances, therefore, yes, we do want an official dispute. Yes, because we don't put all our money on that with unofficial disputes too. But we don't put ourselves in the position of counterposing the one to the other. Instead, we have to ask at each stage, what is the next step? What is the way forward to what we want? Which is a successful dispute. What concretely is the way forward? And that depends on all sorts of considerations. It cannot be answered simply by formula. Let's take an example. We say very commonly, a socialist worker, and wait to it is no outcome. Now, as a matter of fact, as a general proposition, that's true enough. It's not universally true, by the way, but it's true enough. The important question, however, is the question of consciousness. How do we move towards that? And therefore, the combination of unofficial initiatives when we can get them, with a point in the union machine, with the pressure on the officials to make the dispute official, and so on and so forth, all elementary stuff. This has to be our general orientation. As I comrades who are sceptical about this, I don't blame them at all. Come on, you look back at the experience, their experience, the last 9 years or what have you, of course, it seems clear. Who secured the defeat of the steel workers? Bloody Bill Sirs and his officials. Absolutely no question about it. Wouldn't it have been better to be unofficial? Actually, it's not a real alternative, because the level of organisation and consciousness to produce an unofficial strike on a national scale simply did not exist, and very, very, very exists anyway. No, it's more complicated than that. We have to look at how we, at each stage, advance ideas which make sense to the people involved and which we can make a little progress with, which often fall far short of our ideal prescription for victory, but which lead in that direction. Again, the question is, now here's the cautionary tale, and believe it or not, it is absolutely true. Let us look at what is our position on powers. Are we for compulsory powers? Absolutely not. What's our attitude to the Tory legislation? Scrap the lot. Recognise it? Well, we'll come to recognition in a moment. Deploy it wherever possible. But you see, unfortunately, a successive set of pieces of legislation have been passed. Primarily, of course, the Tories' intention was to shackle the trade union bureaucracy, and through the trade union bureaucracy, impose their will on the rank and file. Or even that's a bit of an oversimplification, you know. The latest installments of union legislation are genuinely opposed by almost the entire bureaucracy. It's not in their interest that working class organisation is weakened to that point, but nevertheless, broadly it's true. Now, in 1972, a period of a high level of class struggle, the then Tory Industrial Relations Act, which embodied much, not all, but much of the present legislation, with some differences. It was broken in the end by successful working class resistance. Unofficial and, yes, official too. It was influenced. One thing it provided for, you must have a balance. So there was a balance. There was dispute on the workers. The issues need not concern us. Basically, it was about money. The Act was new. It had been passed the previous year. The three rail unions say, yes, we'll have a balance. Now, of course, we reversed. I hope we did reverse them. I can't actually remember. I mean, we should have reversed them anyway. All that, regardless, etc., etc. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. If we said it, they didn't take our So then we're forced to the situation of balance. What do we say? What we say to me is perfectly obvious. Not obvious to everyone. One of our districts, at that time, a comrade, it would be unfair to name, the French did, they called him Red Ross. produced a leaflet, I didn't give you a survey, produced a leaflet on this question, which called for support, strike, and so on and so forth. How impeccable. But it was heavy, don't vote. Don't vote in the ballot. Why? Now, come on, let's follow the argument. We're against the Act, yes. We don't recognise the Tory courts. Yes, actually, TUC said they weren't going to recognise the Tory courts. Marvellous. Therefore, if you vote, you are recognising the legitimacy of the European legislation. Now, it's logically impeccable, isn't it? The trouble is, that has nothing to do with the because in the concrete circumstances, we ask ourselves, what is the next step? What is the way forward? What is the ability? And there is no question. What was required was a massive yes vote for striking all three unions. I am happy to say that the Reverend ignored that advice, and massively in the case of ASLEF, by a substantial majority in the case of the NUMR, and by a majority even the TSSA voted for all outside action. There wasn't a strike. Actually, the employers conceded. It was their calculation of the balance of forces. The point is, you see, that all the time we have to look at the concrete, and we have to avoid at all costs the simple application of a few general rules without looking at these specific circumstances. Now, then is the question, too, in this connection, with our attitude towards the machines in terms of what we do. You see, the whole question is taken off as a ground concern. You know, as the movement shifted to the right, under the impact of defeat, not only that, under the impact of a general shift to the right anyway, trade union machines, the lower levels too were pulled rifles. And we are, going back to the early 80s, actually in these circumstances, to the extent that we have, and we did have in the early period, a significant layer of people who are in the dual position, they're with us, but at the same time they're holding office of one sort or another, and so they pull the other way. Given that the machine is moving rightwards, it is in general undesirable to hold certain kinds of offices. Not all kinds of offices, certain kinds of offices. We never said you shouldn't be elected as steward. We did say, come on, you've got to stand for election on the basis of people clearly understanding what your politics, what your industrial politics in particular are. Yes, that's always true. But we discouraged them. It's a fact. Were we right? I think we were. Because you see, the general shift to the right affects us too. It's not, we're not guaranteed in tactical terms, because we've got certain basic principal ideas of being pulled towards accommodation, of being influenced, particularly by the left and others. We're not. It is a fallacy. Look here. The only organisations that can withstand successfully the pressures to the left and right, can ignore them, it doesn't matter what happens in the general movement, are sectarian little sects and groups in the most literal sense. If you are involved in the movement, if you are trying to influence the course of events, it goes without saying, you will be to some extent influenced, and therefore you've got to make an assessment at each stage. What is possible, what is not possible, what are the effects. In the present circumstances, it is clear. It is necessary for us, in certain circumstances, anyway, to put our hands where our money is. And to say, yes indeed, we will contest on, let's be clear, an open, absolutely clear basis of where we stand, and we will accept the responsibility. Now, I say that on the assumption that there is a real turn in the situation. If that analysis is wrong, I tell you, without any question at all, I would say, well, it's wrong there, and therefore it follows that the danger of absorption, the danger of becoming a transmission belt for rightward moving ideas, not Tory ideas, social democratic ideas, compromising ideas, into the organisation itself, yes, that will become the main thing again. What I'm saying is, you have to make an analysis. If the analysis is right, then we need to make a certain shift in these directions. Look at the question of number. Yes, okay. Look at the question of numbers. Now, I will confess, just to show you that I don't think I know it all, I was highly sceptical about the results of the ballot in Alabama. I was sceptical. I mean, I talked to brilliant comrades, Manchester in particular, who assured me we were going to win, and I thought, yeah, maybe we are. But let's look at the union as a whole and so on. Nevertheless, I'm sorry, the thing was a success. Little interjection in this earlier. You know, we had one, it was last year, wasn't it? Come on, must be now go people here. It was last year, was it?
We lost it last year.
Yeah, I know we lost it. I talked to a comrade, I think at the meeting, it was in Northampton, I think, and he was a branch official, wasn't he? A branch official of Northampton. Now, his attitude to the ballot question was, again, an illustration of the pitfalls of making a rather simple analysis and going from A to T, or something like that, without the intermediate steps. In his case, his attitude was, you know why the bureaucracy has called this ballot? It is because they know it's going to be lost, and having got that result, they will then be able to have a complete justification for opposing all action. Now, you know, comrades, it is conceivable that those thoughts were indeed in the heads of a number of people at the top of Mount Hope. But that is irrelevant. To win the ballot was centrally important. Centrally important. Good, we lost it this time alone. We have a problem. No question, there's never been a serious national dispute before. The leadership will call tokens, will try to avoid real action, have to argue to expand it and so on and so forth. But ask the simple question, are we for these tokens? Unequivocally, yes. You see, token strikes can be of a number of different kinds. In one case, they are a device by the leadership which has been forced into action to prevent real action. But in other cases, the impact of a token dispute can be to raise the level of confidence, to raise the level of combativity. I hope there is going to be a massive turnout on Tuesday. If there is, that will be also a victory for us. If there is not, it's not simply a question of a defeat for the left, defeat for the bureaucracy, it is a defeat for the movement as a whole. And that will have its effect generally. So that in all these things, we have to restate our basic principles. Let's sum up, not principles, our basic principles. Our attitude to the Labour bureaucracy, the union bureaucracy and its political offshoots, absolutely true. One, we don't trust them as far as we can throw them. Two, we understand that they are a basically conservative layer, but a basically conservative layer rooted in the working class movement. They are not the enemy, although they often align themselves with the enemy. They help the enemy, they obstruct our activities, but they are not the enemy. Without the working class movement, they are nothing. Third, that in the course of the struggle with the Labour bureaucracies, actually we have to be tactically very flexible. It is not, it simply will not do to say, as some people say, but some lefties do, you know, and any disputes coming up, the leaders will sell you out, you know, to the extent that they believe. You know what the effect of that is? Well, you understand I mean, why not? Come on, I mean, without understanding the dynamics of the development of the process. Finally, very important thing, not only a question of tactical flexibility, we must not idealize rank and file action and rank and file leadership. Now that might sound rather, right-wing stuff. Let me explain what I'm doing. Of course, we are always for initiatives from below. Of course, it is marvellous that there are a number of disputes in which either pressure from below is the primary thing, rank and file action leadership occurs, or in which rank and file pressure is nevertheless absolutely central to them, even through rank and file leadership. We should not imagine that this means that the layer of people thrown up in there necessarily, they're not bureaucrats, no question of selling out in the sense that, you know, they can't stand a point against them. But we should not assume Do they understand the dynamics of the process? I mentioned the students and the student fixing. They certainly won't do it. They don't know how to do it. And it should not surprise us. This is why I was thought on this. You know, successful rank and file movements, as opposed to rank and file initiatives on this and that, are very rare. I mean, long-lasting. They depend on a combination of circumstances. In particular, they depend on a general radicalisation, a general mood of dissatisfaction amongst working people, and so on and so forth. But they also depend on something else. They depend on a network of militants who have at least something in common. Now, a network of that sort, extending beyond the drum and beyond the union and so on, was created in, for reasons, economic reasons, circumstances, nature of bonus payments, and so on and so forth, in certain industries, in the building industry, in the engineering industry, and a number of other places. It was created basically around the communist party. Never, but not the, catastrophic, eviscerated communist parties today. The communist party, which was less Stalinist, was very Stalinist, not going to idealise them, many sellouts and so on and so forth, but still did have an orientation on working class organisation. Later, we were, the early 70s, able, as the CP was moving rightwards, and there was a big upsurge in the working class movement, able to make certain modest steps in the same direction. We must emphasise that they were modest steps. We set up various things called rank and file movement. Some of them were real. In a sense, what is real? We want to have some actual influence on people outside. It doesn't just exist in our heads and in arbitrary rooms. Some of them were, to be counted, a bit funky. Okay, you try various things. The circumstances were favourable and so on. It's essential to understand that, yes, that has to be done at the time, but that, too, it cannot be done by an act of will. We often blame it for winding down the rank and file. You know what the truth is in the early 80s? They found themselves down. What we did away with was the pretense that they existed, when in reality, in any genuine sense, they did not exist. Are we now in a position to reverse that process? Frankly, I doubt. But we have to take certain tentative steps. We have to take tentative steps. It does not simply depend on our will. Finish this. The second point I made at the beginning. It is a serious issue. Without wanting people to get carried away, it's really very exciting. I mean, it is! That woman and her class are actually on the defensive for the first time in a decade. That's bloody marvellous news, but it shouldn't lead us to simply with wild enthusiasm forget the lessons that we've learned and ought to learn. We have in these circumstances to make the most of our opportunities, and remember, we want the working class movement to win. It's not simply a question of the SWP winning, we want the movement to win. That is going to require great tactical flexibility, real thinking as opposed to sloganising about this, that and the other disputes, and a great increase in our efforts, which I hope over time we will achieve.
Make your way down to the front to save any time, and the first two speakers will be Eddie Prevost, followed by Jack Robertson.
To be honest, I didn't really want to speak first, and it wasn't because of nervousness or anything like that, but it was because I wanted somebody to come up here to really argue against, and I can't argue against what I already agree with, basically. But I'll try and reinforce a little bit what Duncan's been saying. When I first started off politically, I joined the Communist Party. This was 59, I think, 58, 59, in Force. And at that time, the Communist Party had an orientation in rank and file. I remember the TNG, and the TNG at the time had what they called bans and prescriptions in the union. That meant communists and they included within that fascists, could not hold office. And that meant that the Communist Party, in some unions, not in the engineering unions, especially, but in some unions, had to organise unofficially. And later, we organised in Fords, but we also organised, later I worked in the docks, and my dad was a doctor. I worked in the docks, and we was organised there. And I was on the liaison committee. And after a period of, a lot of it was to do with being in the docks, we finally, when Devon came in and the new scheme came in, we managed to, I think the Communist Party actually managed to do a deal with Jones on his election. When Jones was elected, he got the support of the Communist Party, the left kind of machine within the TNG. And part of the deal was that he would support the removal of the bans. And it came up when we first elected shop stewards in the docks. Communists were elected, and there was a dispute within the union, and finally it was agreed that there would be a change in rule and communists could hold office. Now, it's a long story, I know, but the point of the story is that, you know, when I look what's happened in the intervening period, you know, what's happened to the Communist Party and where it's gone, it seems to me a sort of tragedy for the working class, because unfortunately the Communist Party, well, fortunately at the time, the Communist Party did have a measure, a huge measure of support within factories. If you were a militant, you didn't join the Labour Party, because there's no point in there, no organisation on the floor. It was the Communist Party that had the organisation. And the Communist Party has actually gone into sort of a layer of the bureaucracy, if you like, into the Ron Todd sort of stream, and the Morning Star sort of stream, and there's been no replacement. And there has to be a replacement if we're ever going to break with the bureaucratic layer. If ever we're going to break with that conservatism, and we understand what that conservatism is. It's basically, in terms of Ron Todd and me as a docker, what it is Ron Todd's got his suite, he's got a nice little job, he's got a nice car, he's got a good pension, he's got a good wage, right? And he'd rather than sequester my job and my wage than he'd rather than sequester his job. Right? And that's basically the result of the Conservative. That's what the Conservative basically is. And so, for me, it came as no surprise that in the middle of the point when the employers made their attack, you know, on a policy of the union that had stood for 11 years, right? 11 years that policy, because we didn't expect the attack to come before that. We knew over the last few years the attack was coming, and the policy existed for 11 years, and Todd sold it out in this couple of seconds, right? And yet, you can go on TV and say, well, I've been a union member for 35 years, I've supported the policy of unilateralism for 30 years, and I'm not about to change my mind and change my principles. But he changed his principles on his standing on his feet as soon as the attack came, right? He changed union policy, literally, in that moment. And unfortunately, the stewards and the if you like, the lower rungs of the rank and file bureaucracy, right? Because they're part of that broad left, and because they have a connection with Todd, they are dragged into it. They are dragged into it, and they act as a conservative force amongst the rest of the rank and file. And many of us have been trying to, from day one of that attack, trying to initiate a rank and file strike without any success. And this is amongst a group of workers who had a real rank and file movement, who've improved in practice, have had unofficial national strikes, so they're proven in the past, but yet, because of their relationship, if it had been Arthur Deegan, who was a complete right-winger in there, there's no doubt we would have been on strike today. I feel that we would have been on strike. Despite all the setbacks in the movement, there would have been no connection between that layer and Todd, but because there is that connection, because Todd is the left face of new realism, he managed to put the brakes on us, and it's going to be causing absolute disaster for us. Now, obviously we're not going to try, we're not going to stand around try about it, we've got to do something about it and try it. But obviously it's a big setback, and if we lose it, it's a big setback for the movement.
To be followed by Timothy.
Right, Congress, but like Eddie Prevost, I will be wanting to carry out some picket line intimidation on Dave Hayes after your statement finishes. I want to start off by, well, I don't really want to say very much at all, but see, Duncan started at the beginning with the defeats of the 80s, but the only thing I really wanted to say was that it did start before that. It's very, very prevalent on the left. Everything starts from 1979 when Thatcher came into power. And all the defeats are put down to primarily the draconian effect of Thatcherism. Now, of course, it did start long before that, and it's fantastically important that we understand the way things changed during the period of the Labour government from 74 to 79. If you go back further than that, up until 68, the average levels of strikes in Britain were at a fantastically low level. They were, I can't remember exactly the figures, 1.5 million in the 40s, 2.5 million in the 50s, 3.5 million in the 60s. 72, the figure for Britain was 21 million. 74, 17, 18 million. It rose massively in the period 68, 70, 74. And in that period, what happened at the same time was that the shift in the balance between the control of the bureaucracy and the independent organisation and confidence of the rank and file shifted significantly, not everywhere and not all the same at the same time, but shifted generally significantly enough to open up initiatives for the rank and file. When Labour got elected in 74, that whole thing was driven very much into reverse, and the reason for it was because of the really fundamental problem within the British trade union movement, which has existed for years, which is the divorce between economic and political struggles. You can go during a period of Tory rule, be opposed to the Tories, on the one hand through industrial militancy, and on the other hand believing that you can ultimately get Labour into office. When Labour gets into office, you're then faced with a problem, and the movement was faced with a fantastically serious problem, which it never really came to terms with in the 70s. And this, of course, was encouraged by people like Jack Jones, Hugh Scanlon, the left leadership, and so on and so forth, to collaborate with the Labour government while it was office, to keep it there, and so on and so forth. And because of that, the confidence, the independence of the rank and file was then starting to be dragged back the other way. And that process had started before Thatcher came in.